Yeah.
I'm good, thank you. Having a
I
nice time in LA.
Awesome to start. Your movies and like collaborations, especially, are always so driven, especially by the characters. And when you are approaching kind of crafting, like soundtrack is the wrong word because they're not soundtracks, but when you are making music that goes along with a story, especially in the case
Mm.
of a movie like Flora and Son, how do you kind of approach crafting music in that way? Because it is different than just like a regular album.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, what we did was basically once John had a pretty good shooting script, we sat down over Zoom because I was in Scotland and he was in Dublin, and we just kind of suited for this film. But we walked through the script and kind of said, okay, there's going to be a song here. What does this character sound like? What do they like to listen to? And just kind of try to build up a picture of who they were. And then we started, I mean, musically, and then we started to ping ideas backwards and forwards. But then, because obviously anything that was that going to be performed on screen, we had to have ready before they started to shoot. Whereas the score we could do later. But
Mhm.
anything you were going to see somebody singing, we had to have that song pretty much ready. And it was getting pretty close to the wire on Meet in the Middle and High Life, the last song that they do in the pub. Um, John and I had quite a lot of it done, but when the actors started to play their parts, they got really into who they were and what they would say and what. And also, Eve's actually from Dublin and Joe's actually from LA, so they've actually got that in common with their characters. So Eve had some opinions about what she would say. Joe had some opinions about what he would say or wouldn't say. And John Carney just said, well, why don't we just all go into the studio together and hash it out? And so I was terrified. And then went into the studio and hashed it out. And it was actually really great fun. They brought loads to the party. They kind of were in character, but also, as I say, they also had a lot of knowledge of what they were singing about. And so by the end of, we had to do it on a weekend because they were shooting. By the end of that day, we had both lyrics and stuff finished for the songs and started recording.
And does that play a part? Because I was going to ask about them because it's like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, like I'm a millennial, so I grew up kind of in the era where Joseph Gordon-Levitt was like everyone's kind of crush. And so like we all knew he could sing and dance and do all the things that, now when people don't know him as well are like shocked when he's good at it. And we're like, where were you in 2007 or
Yeah.
8?
Yeah.
And then Eve, obviously, everyone like if they know who she is, they're like, well, that's Bono's daughter. Like she comes
Yeah,
from
she's going to be
a
musical.
yeah. And so did that play a part in like how you guys kind of approached the musical aspect of it, or did it come from getting to meet with them and like build the characters and the music that way?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of how musical Joe was.
Mhm.
And he and I spoke before, way up front of shooting. There was actually one song that now ended up on the end titles that actually was going to have a scene. And so you would see Joe playing. And I wanted to make sure that he would be convincing enough playing the guitar, even though it was
Mhm.
me playing on the track. But and then there was also talk of possibly recording it live. So could he cut it, kind of thing. So John asked me to just do a kind of exploratory Zoom with Joe. So um, he knew what we were going to work on, and he prepped it. And when I got on the Zoom, I said, so it doesn't really matter if you can't play this all, but if we can get enough of it that we can shoot it and it looks convincing. He said, yeah, okay. And then he started playing, and I was like, oh God, he's better than me. So I was like, I thought, okay, we've got no problem with Joe. He's going to be able to cover anything we throw at him. And he was. So he's very musical. Like, I mean, he could have been in a band.
Mhm.
Um, Eve is basically the first thing she said to us was, I'm not my dad. I'm not a belter. I'm not going to give you a big rock performance. And we were like, good, because that's not what we want. But then once we heard her sing, um, we just knew that she was going to be able to do it easily. And she did. And she really enjoyed it, I think. She did a post this week on Instagram where she was talking about her accidental rock star because she never intended to sing on anything, you know, it just came up. So.
Yeah, because she is so funny. Because like I watched Bad Sisters and had like no idea because it's like I've never looked up Bono's last name, so like the other
Right.
I was like, it's just
Yeah.
Bono. And so then to look her up and see kind of like, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I can see it with my own two eyes, but I didn't like know. And then to see this movie, I was like, oh, it makes sense that she is just that talented
Yeah.
in comparison.
I
But
think John Carney, the director and
mhm,
writer, has known Bono, but that, you know, they're Dublin
yeah,
entertainment business, so he's known Bono for a long time. And he, I think, met Eve when she was about 14 years old, and she said, "I'm going to be an actress." So when, and he hadn't seen Bad Sisters at that point, but his agent, her agent, called and asked for an audition, and at that point it was Zoom again. Fittingly for this movie, we had to do a lot of the prep on Zoom. But and John was a little bit skeptical. He'd seen her in something else. I don't know what it was, but he said she was buttoned up like in a kind of Edwardian kind of outfit and stuff, and
mhm.
just didn't know that she could. He didn't feel she was right for Flora, but he did it. He did the Zoom, and then when he came off the Zoom, he was just like, "Oh my God, we've found Flora. She is Flora. You know, she's funny, she's smart, she's very Dublin, and you know, she practically is Flora, actually." You know, so
She was like, great, gonna pluck her and put her in.
yeah.
With you and John have worked a lot together though. Like I don't know if you can see it. There's a Sing Street poster behind me, but
Oh wow.
but you guys have worked a lot
That's
together,
cool.
right? Collaborated with one another. What is it about working with each other that like is familiar? Obviously, like that comes with having that kind of back and forth often. But what is
Mm.
it about working with each other and kind of just repeat performances that make it so kind of fun for you as a creative to keep coming back with John Carney?
Well, if John calls me, I'm there because it's well, who else makes films that allow you to write songs for such amazing characters? There's so few people make, and they're not strictly musicals as well. They're
Mm.
you know, they've got a lot of songs in them. They're really movies about the power of music, and obviously the first thing we did was Sing Street,
Mhm.
and the reason we did that, I got a call for that. I'd never met John before, but it was because he was trying to reflect the story in the movie. The brother turns the kid onto all this music, and in John's real life as a kid, he had a school band, and his brother used to turn him onto music. And one of the bands that he had turned him onto was my band, Danny Wilson's first album.
Mhm.
And so John had this idea of people that he liked at that period of time. He's going to get them all to write a song each. That was kind of his concept. And so he started calling people, and he was getting some things back, I think. But when he called me, I was already a huge fan of Once. And so I was really excited. And I wrote him a song in like a couple of days, sent it back to him. And he just loved it. And he said, "Why don't you just come in and do the whole film?" So I was completely thrilled about that. And then before I knew it, we were basically writing songs across, like just sending ideas backwards and forwards. I was in Scotland again, he was in Dublin, and then he just said, "Let's get you over to Dublin." And when I got there was a whole band set up in the studio, and some of the lyrics hadn't been finished or anything, you know.
Mhm.
So that's when I sort of discovered that John likes to. I guess everything's to keep it really exciting. Everything happens really quickly, and it's kind of like on the edge. Some of the songs for Flora were like we literally were shooting in a couple of days, and we hadn't quite finished them. You know, we had stuff, but we were like, it's so there's an excitement to the way that he works, and I love what he does. He seems to love what I do, and it's just a really comfortable and fun collaboration. So I'd do it anytime, you know. And I think we get really nice results. I kind of came from a background of originally, as I say, I was a recording artist, but I quite quickly became a producer and songwriter for other artists.
Mhm.
When you do that, you kind of have to get into their head and their story and what they want to sing about, what they want to talk about. And so that was a good grounding, I think, for writing for characters. And I also think that because of that, I'd worked on a really wide range of musical styles. And so, again, if you look at the amount of different styles in this, particularly in Flora, more than Sing Street, we've got to cover the kid rapping and making drill, and then you've got the Joseph Gordon-Levitt character loves these old singer-songwriters, and so, she loves dance music, and then you've got Oren's kind of electronic pop music. So I've kind of done a wide range of stuff. So it was kind of, in that regard, I think I'm probably a good Swiss Army knife for John, and that I can kind of like jump into a lot of different stuff. He can throw anything at me, and I can kind of come back at him with something.
Like, I get it. When it's really interesting, as you said it, I was like, as soon as you were explaining, like, to get into the head from the producers, I was like, well, that comes in handy when you're making music for characters. But it does too. Like, John Carney's work works very well as adaptations, because like one of my favorite adaptations for stage was Once the Musical. Like, I think it is still one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen transferred from a film to stage. And I was very upset that I didn't get to see Sing Street get transferred. My friend saw it, I didn't get to see it, and I was mad about it. But
well, we're still sort of trying to get that up and running again. Like, we did a run in Boston, and yeah, I was sort of very involved in that as well. But I think we're trying to find a theatre in London now, so hopefully it will run again. It will live again. That's what I hope. It does that.
I would love that, because I didn't get to, like, my friends always talk about it, and I want to see it really badly. But I do think, like, obviously Flora would be very hard because it's very separated and all that kind of things. But for you guys, is there ever like a world in which, like, I know John's a director, but he seems like the kind of guy that would adapt to a different format. Is there a world in which you two would want to collaborate on something that is directly into like a Broadway musical or a musical like that? Because it is such a cool kind of world that you both have sort of created for yourselves.
If he was to ask me, I would be absolutely yes to do it. What I'll say about John is that in the past with theatre, he's kind of said theatre is completely different, and I leave that to people to adapt it for theatre. But then just probably when we were making Flora, so maybe 8 months ago or something, he said to me that he had an idea for a stage thing. And then he never told me any more about it again. But I thought, well, that's at least a movement in that direction, so he might do something. But I couldn't say that he definitely will. It was just that he's clearly had an idea for something that would be a new thing that he would write for stage. So it's possible.
Well, because I love that, because you guys, like you said earlier, like, I like how the musicals are not so much, they're not musicals, but they are about music. Because that's why I like Once and Sing Street and Flora, I like very much, because they are quote unquote musicals, but they are about the making and art of music, which I think is a very distinct kind of difference in that world.
Definitely.
And for you as a musician that has gotten into kind of like, it's so weird to like say the art of musical. It's because it's not a musical. It's
I know.
To, like, categorize.
But even John struggles with that. He'll say to me, it's not a musical. There's only going to be a few songs. Well, 8 or 9 songs.
Like,
before you know where you're at it. Like, this
one
is a
has
musical.
like 15 songs in one. So I'm like, there's a lot of songs in that.
Exactly.
But, for you though, like, as a musician who now gets to do this, what is kind of the exciting aspect of that? Because it's a different ball game, but it's so cool because it is bringing, the rock element to a new kind of art form, because it's still that like musical thing, but it's rock music a lot of the time.
Well, first of all, it's a total privilege and honor. The thing about film compared to, I mean, when I'm making records, sometimes there's just me and the artist and we make the record. Sometimes there's like 5 people on it. Sometimes there's like 7 people on it. Sometimes you get a string section or whatever, so it gets bigger. But in general, there's not a lot of moving parts to it compared to a movie. To get a movie made, the amount of people you need to fund it to start, and then all the moving parts. It's hundreds of people in the end that it takes to make a movie work. Even a low budget movie. So, you know, just to be able to get past that hurdle is amazing. But I love John's work. I love his writing. It really moves me. I find it incredible. I love working with him. He's a really lovely person. He's got a huge heart that goes into his stuff. He's very loyal to people. But the thrill of finally seeing, because I've always loved music and music in movies, and so music and movies. And when I was an artist, I used to go and watch pretty much every film that came out. When I was living in London, I would just go and watch movies for inspiration and get loads of ideas for songs by watching film. So it was always interconnected for me, but I never figured out how to do it. And I had a few songs placed in film, but nobody had asked me to actually contribute something directly until John did. And so this is a long answer, but I when you get to collaborate on something that's bigger than just the song, and then when you see it come together, and especially once it's all been edited and mixed and you see it on a big screen, it's just like I can't describe how amazing it is. So I love doing it. I love the process of doing it, and then I love the results. Anytime for me, I love it.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, I'm assuming it has that kind of reaction to see like how many people also love those collaborations. Because I was like, I know I'm not alone in being like, I love when John Carney and you collaborate on these movies because it makes me very happy to see like,
Thank you.
that odd
You know,
niche.
it's funny as well. The first thing that we did together, Sing Street, if it's in the way it was the easy way in, because both John and I had been in school bands and around that time, and so. And we'd done the thing and like changing your image every week. And, I mean, it was kind of us. So as kids, so we went in on the shallow end, really, in the sense that we knew exactly what this was. And sort of musically, it was, all music that's had to fit into that kind of world, that genre, and it was all recorded with a band, so it had a sound. Whereas with Flora, and also with a lot of the stuff we did together for TV on Modern Love for Amazon, there was a lot of different styles to cover, So Flora was, in a way, more complex. No, not in a way. It definitely was more complex, like musically, than even though the songs are simple. But it was just the amount of styles that we had to cover for each of the characters, was wide.
For our last question, I always like to ask, which is, I know it's an impossible thing to ask a musician this. It's always impossible to ask anyone else, but I ask musicians this, and I know it's impossible to answer this. But with a movie like Flora, is there one song that you made that you were like, this one I enjoy more than the other ones that I have made for this movie? Not that you think it is better, that you just enjoy like listening to and playing more than the other ones that you have crafted for Flora.
Well, you'll probably be surprised, but the one that just cracks me up, it's Abracadabra, which is the song that the kid makes on the housing estate, the rapper on the housing estate, because that's actually me rapping in my attempt at an Irish accent, and it was just so much fun to do. And then the guy who played the rapper was absolutely brilliant as well. Like, and we worked on it across Zoom again. It just cracks me up, and I love him in it as well. I love when he's got girls appearing from the north side. So that's my most fun one. But otherwise, you put so much into all of them. I think one that's been slightly overlooked that I really like is the song that has a little video for it that Oren does. I'll Be the One. Really, that has a little pop song. That's cool.
Yeah. I agree. Thank you so much for talking with me today again.
Thank you so much.
I love your collaborations, and so whenever you guys get to work together, it makes me very happy. So thank you for your time. I really
And me, thank you very much. It's lovely to chat to you.
Have a great one.
Bye.